Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Astro Alchemy. It is Sarah Burns
Lora Zuanic.
and we are here to talk about the transits of August 10th, 629. Ooh, August, I'm like getting ahead of myself, sorry. We're here to talk about the transits on August 10th. The time is 6:29 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we're going to kind of cover what's been going on for the past 7 days and going to be going on for the next 7 days. So a little bit of past, a little bit of future astrology. And then we're also going to, as usual, cover the gene keys and the human design perspective of the same transits. This week, the sun is moving through gate 7. And so we're going to touch on gate 7 from the perspective of human design, and then also the gene key 7. So Laura, is there anything that you want to talk about before we jump into the transits?
Just want to say, if you're new here, welcome. If you're old here, welcome back. We're excited to talk at you for the next hour and a half, probably. So get cozy. But other than that, no, I'm good.
Okay, sweet. So do you want to just pull up the chart of the moment?
Sure. 1 second, please. The chart is like a few hours old because I pulled it up earlier today, so don't mind the wrong ascendant, but there we go. And it's a little too zoomed in.
Okay, so something that we had talked about last week was the Saturn or the Mars Uranus North Node conjunction that was squaring up against Saturn in Aquarius. And so something interesting that's happening today, that energy is still somewhat in action, just because Saturn is still at 22 degrees. North Node and Uranus are still at 18 degrees. Mars has moved forward, but then also the sun has moved to 18 degrees of Leo. So today we actually have the sun squaring Uranus and the North Node. And I think something important to talk about, because on the 11th, or tomorrow, we're going to have a full moon in Aquarius with the sun in Leo, and the moon being at 18 degrees of Aquarius. It's going to square Uranus, and it's going to form a T-square between the nodal axis, between the South Node in Scorpio and the North Node in Taurus. And so this is like a very interesting energy, to say the least, just because we're dealing with fixed signs, and fixed signs are the signs that are the most stable and solid. And so having this Uranian energy mixed with this Grand Cross is just, it feels very much like there's something that's shaking the very structure of whatever it is that we've been solidly seated or standing upon for a while. It's getting shaken. So Laura, do you want to talk about that at all?
Yeah, it's funny because I didn't even realize the full moon is coming too. I was just thinking, oh no, like Sarah got the day wrong. It's actually Saturday, Sunday that the sun will be opposing Saturn, but oh no, the moon's a part of it too. So I like how you said that, how fixed signs kind of bring us the most stability, and yet there's so much instability here. The thing that's fresh just on my mind is sun opposing Saturn, and it's funny because the sun is at home in Leo and Saturn's at home in Aquarius. And a way I've heard Saturn described is as the counselor or advisor to the king, to the sun. I feel like he's the person that actually like does everything. If you think of any type of monarch, I mean, most are just rulers, people in charge, really authoritarians, which is funny because like that's the degree of, or the energies of the sun right now in gate 7. But if you think of like authoritarians who aren't very great authoritarians, who just are the face of authority without the actual oomph behind that authority, like they have someone on the side like managing everything for them. They're the face of the company, and yet do they actually really do anything, or do they just shake hands when they have to like make an appearance? And I'm trying to think of an example of like someone, whether alive or fictitious, who like fits this role, but I can't think of anyone off the top of my head. Hopefully Sarah, you can understand what I'm explaining. But Saturn's helping us do all this stuff behind the scenes, essentially, like to aid the quote unquote face of the company. And it's interesting that they're opposing, because I feel like it's a bit of a face off, because they are, meeting each other across the zodiac. It's a neutral aspect, like trine sextiles, those are quote unquote positive squares. Those are quote unquote harsh. Oppositions are like somewhere in the middle. They can be easy, they can be hard. But the sun and Saturn are coming at opposite ends of the zodiac. And so one is trying to do his thing and the other his own thing. And so I feel like it's Saturn being that supportive hand that's trying to help the king do the kingly things, and yet the king just wants to drink a bunch of wine and party. And so like there's this clash of energy within our ability to practically accomplish stuff. Like there is the grounded Saturnine energy that wants us to be responsible and diligent and pay attention to whatever like needs to get done, and yet the sun just wants to have fun. So I feel like this is probably a big mix of this full moon energy with the sun in Leo and the moon in Aquarius. Is it a clash? I don't know if it's a clash. Like, is it supportive? I'm not sure. It's a very mysterious transit energetically for me. Like, I can't pick up on if it's going to be malefic or benefic. I feel like it might depend on the person and how it shows up. Like, there's this potential that's there that I guess it matters like what you do with it. Potential is there. The Saturnine and solar potential are there, but like whether you actually use it will amount to whether anything actually happens or not. Those are my 2 cents. I don't know what you have to say.
No, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, something that I was just thinking about is how in human design, the personality chart is basically made with the square sign to the sun sign. So the sign that is 90 degrees away from the sun sign is usually where the personality sun is. And so I'm thinking about how, there's going to be, there potentially, there's going to be children. My sister's having a baby, full disclosure, where they have a double dose of whatever these gates are. So Lora, is the full moon happening where the sun's in 7 and the moon is in
13? Well, is it? I can double check the degrees of the full moon, because today is the 6th line day. So I'm going to explain stuff quickly. Sarah mentioned like with your human design chart, your design sun is 90 degrees before your solar sun. So our human design chart is made up of our birth chart, like the planets at the time of our birth, plus the chart of the planets, or the positions of all the planets at a day that's precisely like 88 days before we were born. So in utero, those 2 charts combine to make our human design chart. So that's explanation 1. And like the part when you're in utero is your design chart, and when you're born, it's your personality chart. And for 7, shoot, I forgot the other thing I wanted to say, but I can look it up to see the precise degree. So you talk while I.
Okay. Yeah, I think the other thing that you were going to say is just that probably something along the lines of them being 90 degrees away from each other. But at least in the astrology wheel, the personality and design sun, but maybe not. Maybe that was just
I don't remember. It's gone.
Okay. But no, I mean, I think that's one thing that I'm thinking about. But the second thing that I'm thinking about is just like how much I'm seeing that's like things that like the debris that was settled at the bottom, it's like everything's getting flipped upside down. And now the debris that I was at the bottom, like we're able to sift through literally and metaphorically. Like, for example, I'm moving all of my old furniture from an old Cube Smart into a new location where I get to go through all of my old belongings and get rid of everything that's no longer necessary and just keep the essential things. And so that feels very, for me, and I mean, Laura, you know this, my Saturn, or my moon, is at 26 degrees of Aquarius, and my IC is at 23 degrees of Aquarius. So Saturn is like right there, right on like a very major degree, lighting all of this up for me. And then, and this is happening for me in my 4th and 10th house. And so it makes sense. It's like the full moon happening in Leo and in my in Leo and in Aquarius is showing up with work stuff, which it definitely is, and then also home stuff, which it definitely is. But then having this like opposing energy, it feels personally, because I'm a Scorpio rising and I have the nodes and the whole Taurus situation happening across my 1st and 7th house axis, that it's like it's almost in conflict with the way that I'm feeling right now. So like all of these things in work and at home, or the debris is getting lifted, but like I'm not really energetically feeling in tip-top shape. I'm feeling very, I've been waking up in the morning with anxiety. I've been feeling very just disheveled and out of alignment lately. And so it's almost like I have this, there's like a pressure nonetheless to get the things done. And it is still correct to get the things done, despite the fact that it's not really feeling so good. And so that's the way that I'm like literally seeing the energy show up. I mean, that's one of many ways that I'm seeing it show up. I'm seeing it show up for other people too in different ways. But I just wanted to speak from my own experience, since the Grand Cross is happening between my major 1st, 7th, and 4th, 10th house axes. Did you find what you were seeking? Okay.
Yeah. And your ascendant degree is 15 or 18?
It's 14, but my Pluto's at 18 degrees though.
Yeah. So there's a lot going on in your chart right now, which is sometimes we have those moments where it's just like everything's happening all at once and you just got to process and move on and hope that it'll move quickly, except it doesn't go any faster than it's supposed to. I figured out what I wanted to say and what I was looking up. So what I wanted to say is that within a gate, we have 6 lines, which are like a little bit less than a degree per line. So a gate is about 5.5 degrees. And I wanted to say today is a 6th line day. So I wasn't sure if the full moon, which is, if it's tomorrow, if it would still be within the energetics of like today is a 6th line day, which it's not. So the sun will have moved into the next gate, which is 4, and the opposing gate is 49. So the axis is 449 compared to right now, opposite of the sun is 13. 713 is where we're at with the sun and the earth.
Interesting, because that means that the 49th isn't 49 revolution in the
49. Yeah.
And
I think so.
That's a pretty electric energy as it is. Or no, is it the well? It's the, maybe it's the well. Clearly,
I'm thinking of liberation and freedom, but I think that's the 3955 channel. So 49 might be revolution. 49 is part of the 1949 channel between the root and the ESP, emotional solar plexus center, and it deals with tribal energy of like the butcher and the animal that's being slaughtered, or the bride and the groom. It's very much like, what are our needs? How are we going to meet them? Who has the resources? What are the resources? Like, what do we need? That type of energy. And 49 is like the actual like dolling. Is it the dolling out of resources, or like the determination of what are the resources? I'm not sure. I can look it up. But
no, I'm just thinking about it from the I Ching. So
I'm not sure. I can look it up.
Okay, no, and obviously I'm a little bit scattered because this energy. Let me just blame the transits, because honestly, it's been feeling very. You call yourself in a cotton ball brain, but like this is like I'm upside down all the time right now. And so it doesn't really feel like I can focus my energy, which is a little bit frustrating, but I've definitely been sensing that, one of the things that happened in the kind of collective consciousness is that Donald Trump had his, I guess, what is it, golf course / resort / whatever in Mar-a-Lago raided by the FBI. And like it's like just storming the internet with like hilarious memes and things like that, because Donald Trump is what he is to the collective. But it feels like an old president getting his property raided by the FBI is very Saturn opposite Leo, Saturn opposite Sun
and Leo, yeah.
coming up against the nodes, because when we think of full moons, it's like this, the solar energy, the lunar energy coming to a place where they are in perfect opposition, but then we have the nodal axis, which is what I consider the place where like things are materially manifest. And so there's like this huge there's like two streams of energy that are just at cross purposes. And so it may show up in a lot of different ways, likely, but it's like, it's almost like, yeah, there's two streams, one, and neither of them, like if you can imagine a valley or river where there's one stream that's coming from one direction, north to south, and the other stream going from east to west, and they haven't hit yet. But what happens when those two streams meet? I don't know. What happens?
I would guess that the one with greater speed or just force within the water current will be the one that carries the energy and moves the opposite stream into the direction that it's going in.
Yeah, well, and that's kind of like, that's what I'm thinking. Or would they be at odds in such a way that they start
You get a whirlpool.
Yeah,
maybe.
they start to move like southwest or like northeast instead. So the energy is like slightly shaken. I don't know. I don't really know, but like that's what I'm thinking about when it comes.
I feel like not that it matters, but it depends on like the very specific details about these two rivers. Like there's not a one size fits all explanation with like, well, what happened?
Of course,
yeah.
of course.
But it's a good analogy. Like, where is the energy going? You know?
Yeah. Well, and I think that for each person, depending on their chart, depending on their consciousness, like it's gonna end in different ways, because like you said, like the structure of the basins for the water, the pressure of the water, like the all of those things, like they're gonna be slightly different for everyone. So I think that it's gonna show up in that kind of sudden and unexpected way, because again, with the fixed sign energy, it's like the things that we know and that we've come to rely upon over time are the very things that are dealing with this kind of convalescence. No, that's not the right word. I don't know what the right word is.
You're pulling a Lora. You say a word and you're like, that's not the word I'm looking for.
Well, it feels like convalescence, but I don't think that's the right word. It's like the word when they're coming to meet, it's
convergence.
Convergence, a convergence. So thank you. And like, so it's like what happens when that happens, and I think we're seeing a lot of different things happen, right? Like I think I've told you about stuff that's going on for me with work, but then there's almost like things that have been getting pressure for a while. It's like now there's been enough pressure for the scales to tip and something new or something different to show up, instead of all of the same. So, and it's not to say if it's good or bad, because depends. I mean, it really depends, but how you look at it depends on objectives versus subjective perspectives, and it depends on the different circumstances that you find yourself in life, generally speaking. But yeah, I mean, I think this is we talked about it being spicy. It's still spicy. And we talked about last week being spicy. This is still spicy. So any other thoughts, Lora?
Yes, I feel like there's multiple things. Did I confirm that it is? No, it is revolution. 49 is revolution. You were right. There's that. But I wanted to bring up like the relationship between the sun and the earth, which is like sort of like a full moon when the moon gets involved, compared to the nodes, because I liked your analogy with the two rivers, but I wanted to share about the relationship from human design. So in human design, your sun and your earth, not your moon, but your earth, which is opposite the sun's, like it's the full moon axis of your sun, is your incarnation cross. So it's kind of like the burden or the purpose as to why you're here, the energetics of why you're here. In Gene Keys, it's called your genius sequence, I believe, right? Is that what it's called? The genius sequence. Is it a sequence? Now I'm getting my words. I think it is a sequence. I think it is a genius sequence, but it's your life's work, your evolution, your purpose, and your radiance that kind of make up that incarnation cross. And then the north and south node are the storyline. So Ra Uru, the founder of human design, often talks about Hamlet as like an analogy for different bits and pieces of human design. But you have a plot, you have a storyline, and the lines are all the same for each character, but you come into that play and you have to go through the sequence of events for that role, that whatever role it is that you're there to be. And so like you have a role within your incarnation cross of like, what is that character there to experience? And then there's a multitude of adaptations for how that play can unfold. And I laugh because I have a really funny story. But the incarnation crosses are the storyline. So they're the set, they're the scenery for the stage. And I laugh because it's not Hamlet, it's Macbeth. But when I was in high school, I was in drama. And part of our homework was to like watch play or a musical every semester and write about it. And I waited obviously to the very last minute because of an undefined route, and I work well with pressure. But my sister was also in drama class this year too, and so we waited for the last moment to like watch a show. And the only thing that was available was a local college's adaptation of Macbeth, but it was Simpsons themed. So all the characters were Simpsons, the TV show Simpsons characters instead of the Macbeth characters. And not only that, but it was a one-man show. So one man did all the roles of all the characters, Simpson style, for Macbeth. And it was interesting.
A generator. That was definitely a generator.
But I'll never forget like that. Like I've seen plenty of shows and I've forgotten, but like because that is so distinct, I'll never forget it. So like that's not the case, right? We don't come in as a one-man show for all these different roles in our life. We have our one role, but the nodes are like the fact that it was Simpsons themed. That was the setting. That was like the way, the adaptation of the player musical. And so there's kind of that harmony between what we're here to do and the setting in which we get to do it. And so with what you were saying, with like things coming sort of to a crossroads, I don't know if that's the word you said, I can't remember exactly how you phrased it, but like there's this potential for things to manifest. And you think about that in terms of like when we have eclipses, things are manifesting, but they're out of our control. So now we're at the point, like we're in the halfway point between the two eclipse seasons for this year's eclipses of Scorpio and Taurus. We're at the halfway point with Leo and Aquarius. And so I feel like here's where we're furthest that we can be from the nodes, because it's the square. So like the sun and the moon are as far as they can be from the two nodes because they're 90 degrees apart. So perhaps it's where we have the most potential to like take back that power and have, is it Dharma? Like have our own attitude and projections and power and access to shaping reality, to manifest things into reality without fate getting involved to a certain degree. I feel like that. But like with squares, it's touch and go. Or not touch and go, it's touchy. It's more sensitive because squares can be harsh. But like I feel like because there's that separation in the energy, I'm gonna show you the picture of the current moment for all of you listening to like better demonstrate whatever it is that I'm trying to articulate. If we go to the current chart, if these are the nodes, no, that's the node and that's the node. The furthest we can get away from those 2 points is all the way over here and all the way over here, halfway in between. So that's kind of what I'm saying with like the sun and the moon being at like their most uninfluenced potential, perhaps within the like solar year.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really interesting too, because it makes, the nodes are in Vedic astrology, right? They're like these hungry ghosts or these energies of like never being satiated. And so like they move the plot along in the Maya and material reality, but like they're not necessarily in service to our higher selves or like our like the self beyond the physical, so like our soul level selves. And so it feels like what you were saying is probably right too, because we're having the sun in the place that it's at home in Leo, the solar, the energy of the essential, of the spirit, at a crossroads between like the compulsiveness of the physical. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't know how that is going. I mean, how does that end? Like I said, for everybody, it's probably going to be different. For some people who've been working very, like, just working on moving some of their energy away from the lower vibratory fields, getting stuck in some of the swampiness of the not self conditioning and the belief systems that we've all been conditioned in one way, shape, or form, that conditioned to move away from our essential nature. Like wherever we are on that spectrum, I feel like this is going to change something. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to, like I said before, feel good. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to feel bad. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be big, but like there's a shifting taking place, and maybe a new degree of consciousness or a new energetic frequency is going to become more or less available, probably. So yeah, I mean, that's how I'm conceiving of it. Do we feel good?
I think so.
I feel like, yeah, the full moon is I'm just interested to see what happens, because in all honesty, since the end of July, things have been at like high speed. One of the things that came out was that the Earth, it's like moving like 1 millisecond faster. Like,
but it was on just one day. Is it still moving that much faster? Or was it just one day that it was?
I don't know. It was just like, you know, clickbait, but it was really interesting, because I was like, my friend reached out to me and she's like, see, I told you everything was moving fast. I'm like, you wouldn't be able to tell if it was 1 millisecond faster or not. But it definitely feels like things are going at a speed where like I can't necessarily get ahead of them. And so, you know, I mean, I'm sure that I can, but it doesn't necessarily feel that easily accessible to get ahead of them. And so that is where I am. I'm like, since the Uranus Mars conjunction began to form at the end of July, I feel like we're at this kind of breakneck speed that is going until the full moon, before it starts to give us a little bit of space to reflect on everything that's been going on.
But like you've said previously, it's a 2-month-long transit between Saturn and Uranus, so it's not really like that much fresh air energy.
I'm just, honestly, this is gonna sound insane, but I'm just looking forward to Mars moving into Gemini. Like that's my, like, I can't wait for Mars to move into Gemini and the sun to move into Virgo. And like I'm going to be grateful for those like 5 days at the end, from like the 20th to the 25th, where Mercury is in Virgo and Mars is in Gemini, and we just have this like really like tech savvy, like competitive Mars that's just able to balance a lot of things. Obviously I have Mars in Gemini, so I'm a little bit biased, but the Mars and Taurus energy has been a drag for me. So it just, I mean, it's probably all of the things. It's compounded by the Uranus conjunction and the North and South node presence and Saturn and all of those things. But I think that we are going to continue with tension. I just think that we're going to be able to peel back some of the layers of it, maybe by the end of this week. That's what I'm anticipating, but I've been wrong before, and I'm sure I'll be wrong again.
I want to say, let us know, audience. Like, you tell us how you're feeling and if the energies are shifting for you. Let's make this a co-creative conversation here. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see. I feel like all time always feels constant for me. Like, there's no major changes. It's just like my internal state that perceives things differently, but then like from one day to the other, I won't remember my previous internal state. So it's It always just feels like the present moment, more or less. That's why I like bigger transits, bigger long-term patterns. So maybe you'll be able to tell us better next week how you're feeling, especially since it is like very personal to your own chart and your own energetics.
Yeah, and I think that's an important thing for me to say. Like, I definitely am so close to this transit, like so close to this transit that I feel like, you know, if anyone has the fixed signs and like planets that are near these degrees, 18, 22, 24 degrees,
I do though. I have Mercury and Pluto at 22, 23 degrees Scorpio. And I have Chiron and Leo at 23 degrees. My Saturn's in Aquarius at 13 degrees, so that one's off.
Yeah, and I mean, Chiron's interesting, but I feel like the Mercury-Pluto conjunction is, wait, what degrees is that at?
22, 23, one's at 22, one's at 23.
So yeah, that's I mean and that's also been one of the things to note is just with that is that it's been on and off squaring Saturn for most of, you know, this year. So that's interesting. And I mean, I guess you could say that's a longer form planet. And I mean, I can get into the weeds, but I'm not going to, just because Mars is my planetary ruler this year. So I think about Mars's movement, and I'm thinking that that's what's really, it's what's adding all of the fuel, the extra stuff. But yeah, let's put a cork in it there, and then we can talk about the gene keys and human design perspective from the 7.
Is there anything else astrology wise that's worth mentioning?
Well, no.
Venus is opposing Pluto. That happened this past week.
Oh yes. Yes. Good call on that. Venus did oppose Pluto, and Venus is going to be going into Leo very shortly. But I think the opposition from Pluto is the more intense feeling thing.
Yeah. But maybe we can leave that. Well, the opposition won't be really impactful next week, but like in Leo, we can talk about that transit next week. But I feel like we've talked about Pluto a handful of times. If you're unfamiliar, listen to our other recordings. But because we talked about the sun opposing Pluto, because that was at the beginning of July, right? With the 4th of July around that time. I know the 10th, 11th, something in July is that we had that Pluto opposition.
Yeah, it was right around the 4th of July, and I'm never going to stop talking about Pluto, so we're good.
Is there anything you want to squeeze in before we move on about Pluto and Venus? Or
I guess I could just say that Pluto and Venus feels like, I mean, it feels like an obsessive quality in love, of course, an opposition, creating some kind of distance that's creating this like almost like compulsive need feeling for the thing that you want. And like the thing that you want may not be a person, it could be multiple different incarnations of something, you know, of anything. So just obsessing over some kind of desire. I don't know. What do you think?
That feels fitting with how I've been feeling this past week. So yes, I agree. Lust, really, with Venus, it's lust either for another person or like coveting for material goods, because Venus also rules like wealth and beauty and the physical world around us, material things. So yeah, Pluto, I don't know, Pluto, and I've been thinking about power a lot, which kind of fits in with the gene key because Pluto is like a powering or disempowering planet. What does power even mean? Like I looked it up, and it's the ability to do or act in a specific way, which seems interesting because like within Gene Key 7, Richard Rudd talked about how leaders, because Gene Key 7, I guess it's a fine transit, we're transiting into the Gene Key. Gene Key 7 is about leadership and rulers and authoritarians. And a true authoritarian doesn't, you know, want to take away anyone else's power. They want to empower others, versus a false or not so great authoritarian needs the power of others. And so they're going to use that energy of other people to feed on, because they need that for their own benefit. They need to take power away from people, which, you know, with that definition, it might suggest like taking away someone's ability to do something so that you have to do it for them, or you have to be a piece of the puzzle for that thing to happen. You have to be an equation in their, you know, ability to do anything. And so they rely on you for that, and it gives you that sense of power to be in that position, which you're taking away from them. But I don't know, like Pluto in power, in terms of empowerment, like Pluto will push us down so that we have to get ourselves back up. And that's usually like my simplified way of describing transits. Like it's so multifaceted, Pluto, because it's the god of the underworld and so many things. But like when it comes to hardcore transits that people have experienced, or people with like really intense aspects in their chart, Pluto most often comes up in the way that like someone will take away they will disempower you, not in the sense that they're going to take your ability away to do anything, but it usually shows up as abuse of some sort, whether it's sexual or physical or emotional abuse. And so it's that sort of power distortion that ends up happening with Pluto. So be wary of that this past week, or can't be wary of the past, but in the future, just like look at power dynamics. I feel like that is, I mean, we're also in day 7 or day 6 of this gene key. So we're at the end of this transit with the sun. So it's like, this has been happening the past 5-6 days with the authoritarian energy, but just like, it's interesting to think about power dynamics and how we play a role in one another's lives.
Oh, that was a whole word. Yeah, I mean, I definitely, like I said, I'm never going to stop talking about Pluto, because there's honestly so much to unpack with it, and having my Pluto in my first house, I feel like, you know, I've seen the ways that it's come out of me, the Plutonian urge towards power, and an abuse of power, right? The way that abuse plays into power when we're coming at relationships from that place instead of a loving, co-creative, expansive place. And then also how other people will project their unwanted things onto other people, because they don't want to look at it. And I think Plutonian points can be a place where people project things onto you, because they'll see Pluto and they'll put their Pluto onto you instead of addressing the stuff that they're not dealing with internally. And so it's like there's like a warped energy that comes to mind too, where it's not, there's something that is like being in a fun house with mirrors that are all discombobulated when it comes to Pluto, where you can't see things as they are. So yeah, if there's been any of that in your relationships and or around the things that you desire, Venusian themes, the Cancerian themes. I mean, Pluto's been going up against Cancer for as long as it's been in Capricorn. It's been opposing Cancer. So this has been an ongoing theme. And so, yeah, I mean, it could show up in a lot of different ways, but yeah, thanks for reminding, because I forgot about that transit with everything else that's going on.
But it does segue us into the gene key, because it talks about power. So I'm gonna share my screen again and share the gene key for our week. We're in gene key 7. So the city, or rather the shadow, is division, with the repressive aspect being hidden and the reactive nature being dictatorial. The gift, I forgot the word, the gift is guidance, and the city is virtue. And the gene key, it is a gene key, the hexagram 7 associated with it is discipline. It's part of the codon ring of union, which is consecutive. So 7, 4, 59, 29 are all together in the same chunk of the zodiac belt. So I think that's interesting. And its programming partner is 13. And from the human design perspective, 7 is here in the G center. So it's part of the collective logical circuitry. Oh gosh, my brain's like right now, it's just not working anymore. It's slow.
Welcome to my past week.
Reactive brain. It's what is it? What's the way of saying it? It's
receptive.
No, it's just slow. Like, I don't know. I feel like there is a phrase for when your brain isn't reacting quickly enough. Maybe that's it. I don't know. Gene key 7 or gate 7 is in the G center of the human design system. It's part of logical circuitry, logical collective circuitry. There we go. Here's 13, the programming partner. Interestingly, 7 is part of the 6 role gates that are keynotes for each profile line, which is your profile is based on your sun and earth position on your personality and design side. And so part of the keynotes and associations with those profile characteristics come from these gates, 7, 1, 13, 10, also 59 and 27. And so if you have gene key 7, 1, 13, 10, 27, or 59 in your chart, then that also adds to your whole picture of like your profile. I'm a 5-1, and there, just for example of these, let's say I have, well, let's not use 13. I have 59 and 13 as part of these role gates, but I'm going to use 59 as an example. I'm a 5-1, and 59, for example, deals with our bonding strategy, how we mate for genetic reproduction of our species. And within these role gates, we have the 6 lines. And so each line has certain characteristics associated with it. The 5th line, I'm a 5-1, so I have 5 and 1. The 5th line is seducer, seduced. And the 1st line is pursuer, pursued. However, in my chart, I don't have 59-1 or 59-5. I have 59-2, which is shyness, boldness. And so that is also a significant contributing energy to my bonding strategy, just in general in life, shyness, boldness, along with the other 2 associated with like 5 and 1. So if you have any of these specific gates, and look at the line that you have within these gates, which you'll see like in your chart based on these numbers. 56, for example, is like currently Venus, and the 0.3 means she's in the 3rd line, because that will also play a role. And so 7 is a major one. 7 is the projected attitude that we have as leaders. So because it's a projected attitude, it sort of deals with, I'm going to turn off screen sharing 1 second. The projected attitude deals with how others see us as a leader. And 7 is this energy of leadership. It's last week we had 33. Yeah, last week we had 33, which is part of this channel. Actually, I'm going to share my screen again, going back to this. No, it's not. 33 is here, but the week before 33, we had 31. And 731 is this whole channel. 1333 is that whole channel. 2 weeks ago, we had 31, which is the end of the logical circuit. And so that when we talked about is how we show up as a leader, as a voice of the collective logical process. And 7 is in the G center. So it's like the self-experience, the self-identification that leads to that sharing of the external for the logical process. And this is my thoughts again. With 7, maybe you want to share. Maybe I feel like my brain is getting caught in volley.
Well, I mean, I don't really have anything to share from the human design perspective other than, this is in the G center. And just thinking about the idea of leadership and thinking about, I think we had conversations about this because you said that, right, the opposite, the other kind of leader is the 31, and the 7 is kind of like the leader in the moment, where the 31 kind of pulls from the past, the 7 pushes into the future. That's
1333. 31 is the voice that connects the 7 to the throat. Which is I lead.
31 is also, though, they talk about leadership within the 31.
Hold on, screen share again.
I think with the 31, for the gene keys at least,
Richard Rudd talked about 13 connecting us to the past.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I was just thinking about 31 because I know 31 is in gene keys. I think the gift is leadership. So so I know that when we were talking about 31, we talked about leadership as well. Although, like you said, the 13 may be another form of it. But in any case, I read this book. I read this chapter relatively quick. I think some of the important things to think about is just the way that Richard Rudd's talking about how leadership in this day and age, like we could have leaders, but most of them are leaders who are concerned primarily with their own, basically they have their own reasons for wanting to take power. They're not doing it.
Yeah, they just want power.
Yeah, they're doing it. They want power. They're doing it for reasons that are very selfish. And until the collective energy gets to a specific place or a specific frequency or a specific awareness, it will continue to elect leaders that are in that vein. They're dictatorial, or they are they're basically these leaders who are completely like in it for their own gain. And when the collective energy shifts and they start to value leaders that are in the positive side of that, it's going to be completely different. But until it shifts, it's kind of like the best leaders of our time are not really seen. We're not really aware of them because we don't have the sensitivity to them, or we don't have the sensitivity or the ability to have eyes that can actually see what that kind of leadership is. And something that I thought was interesting is that the 7 energy has this leadership that's not leading from the front, but it's leading from the inside. It's kind of like this energy that's able to bring things into awareness for the group. And when it's in the kind of more virtuous aspect of the leadership, it's not doing it for itself at all. It's doing it for the higher purpose of the group in general. And so it has a lot less to do with what it wants and a lot more to do with kind of like the higher calling. And so do you have the gene? Can you pull up the gene key image of 7 really quick again? Sorry.
Yeah, I just needed to quiet my own brain for a second, and thank you for going back to the gene keys.
Oh no, it's okay. I mean, it's basically like I'm still learning about the human design aspect of it all.
So am I. We're always learning.
But I mean, like to say anything about it, right? But the 7th gene key, like I read the chapter, and so yeah, I think that it's interesting because when it talks about the shadow of divisiveness, it's really talking about hierarchy. And so it's talking about how we tend to see things in hierarchy. Again, there's another gene key, I can't remember which one, that talks about hierarchy, but it's like there's this addiction to hierarchy, and there's addiction for someone being here and someone being there. And what we've talked about before is that like in leadership, like it's not that a leader is better than the person that's following the leader. It's that the leader has energy that is good for leadership. Let the people who are leaders be the leaders. Let the people who are good at refining things be the refiners. Let the people who are good at engineering be the engineers, right? So it's kind of like a leader just has a specific imprint. And the only reason that people are like, oh, leadership is so great is because in today's society, the people who are leaders are the ones who are mostly full of power. They have the most power, and our society values power. And so leadership isn't a greater virtue than any other of the virtues. It's just that it's looked at in our society in a way that is based hierarchical, and our society values the person that's on the top, and it doesn't see things from the horizontal perspective of everyone being equal. And so, like I was saying, the 7th gene key talks about the kind of embodiment or the ability to lead from the inside of a group. And the fact that when we're actually leading from a place of virtue, the leadership just looks completely different because it's in service to the greater whole. So, and as it says on the page, he talks about repairing the world. It's an energy of cleaning things up, and he talks about a parable from the Kabbalah in the chapter about how there was this, I guess, huge orb of light. I'm totally going to destroy this story, but I think you'll get the gist. That when the world was created, like the bright orb of light like landed in the earth but shattered into a billion pieces. And every time someone behaves from a place of real virtue, like each shard of the orb starts to be repaired. And so there's this feeling of almost like this growing in light when you are a leader, that virtue is it's not a means to an end, but it's the end, and it's the only reason to do things. It's not to be seen, it's not to be acknowledged, it's not to be aggrandized. It's just because virtue for virtue's sake is its own reward. And so when we have those types of leaders in power, they inherently repair things instead of creating more division. So that's my brief overview of the chapter, even though there's a lot more to it.
It's a good summary, though. It's a good summary. I'll add to that, in the shadow, for the repressive shadow, because you talked about the reactive with the dictatorial people who want power for their own means and ends. The others, like there are people who are here to lead, and if you're not embodying that, then it shows up in the repressive hidden nature, where you're just hiding from being seen, hiding from the spotlight, because you don't realize your own power, your own potential as a leader. And so there's plenty of people on our planet who are here to be leaders, and yet they shirk away from that responsibility because they don't know that that's what they're here to be, or that's what they're there to do. So there's that. And in the section of the chapter for the gift of guidance, it made me think about projectors a lot, because Richard talked about how guidance isn't necessarily to tell someone else what to do, but sometimes it's just as simple as listening, which connects to the 13th programming partner of empathy, of you're just there to, listen and be there. And that is sometimes enough support for someone to find the guidance that they need to move on, because true leadership, you're not looking for followers, you're helping other people lead themselves and find their own sense of direction. So yeah, but I think it's potent gene key. In terms, like you talked about, the energetics with the hierarchy and the heterarchy, I think it's gene key 45 that deals with those. I feel like there's multiple ones that deal with the concept of hierarchy. But in the chapter, Richard talked about how like there will be a point in time where there's beings, humans that are being born, and he doesn't like want to draw too much glory to them or attention to them, like, oh, they're so much better than everyone else. But there's certain people being born that are here to change the energetics of leadership, and certain people come here with that potential, with that energy and that mission, and in doing so, enough changes will happen where leadership will become kind of holographic, where it's just an energetic connection with different people that we learn from each other's leadership styles to be able to better lead the whole world. But it's not like there's anything that needs to be done or change or be manipulated. It'll happen actually, like at this point in time when these people come here and do whatever it is that they're meant to do. So hopefully they do their job and they don't stay in the repressive hidden nature. But yeah, I think I just wanted to like hone my mind from the gene key perspective, because there is a slight link. So in one of the sections, I don't remember which one it was, but Richard talked about he mentioned that in Hindu, in the Brahma chakra system, there's certain qualities to the chakras that get associated with how we show up. And he likened it to, these leadership authoritarian qualities. And I thought it was interesting because there's like some similarities between this and the role gates that I mentioned from the human design side for the roles of 7, primarily that the root chakra, the nature is authoritarian, and that is the projected leadership attitude of line 1 for the 7th gate. And so I'm not sure how many of the others fit in because it's 7 chakras versus 6 lines, but I'll just briefly share the others if I can remember them off the top of my head. First line is the authoritarian, and that energy comes from, I feel like one day we're gonna create educational content for you all. I don't know when that's gonna happen. It's in the energetics, but I feel like this would be a part of it eventually when it happens, because it's one of the aspects of profiles. But the authoritarian gets its sense of authority from insecurity. It doesn't know what it knows, and so it has to do the research and investigate, and in doing so, it becomes an authority on what it knows, and therefore it has a projected attitude that it is indeed an authority on the material. The second line, I believe, is the Democrat, in which the Democrat just wants everyone else to take the responsibility. The second line's a hermit. It wants to shirk away from everyone and just be in its own aura and not deal with the projections of other people. And so in doing that within democracy, we can often, and this comes from Ruhu, the energetics, at least not my interpretation and paraphrasing, but he has his own bias and his own attitude about everything. And so that leaches into like all of human design and gives it a certain perception and bias and kind of way in which it can be interpreted because it comes through him. But part of that is being an anarchist and being pessimistic to a certain degree. He's an interesting man. Like, I don't know if he's like truly like that in his heart, or if it was just like how he comes off. Anyways, the energy of Democrat, you think, wow, that's so empowering. We all have a voice and we can all participate in the election of leaders. But the way he described this energy for the second line is actually, you don't have to have any responsibility because everyone else will vote. So you don't have to partake. You don't have to vote. It can be like, nope, I'll let Joe and Bob vote. Their vote will matter. Like, I'm just going to stay at home and not participate. So I say all that to say, like, the word Democrat or democracy, you can have different connotations. So that's the second line, 7.2. 7.3, Sarah, do you know it? I feel like this is one I forgot.
I don't. I just know from Richard Rudd's perspective.
I can look it up quickly. Just the Gene Key perspective.
Yeah.
The anarchist. There we go. The anarchist. A lot of these words are.
Oh yeah, basic. I knew that from being line 3.
So the anarchist says, like, the leadership qualities, when you look at a leader and they're an anarchist, they're gonna break down all the rules and everything that's been built up to pave a new way. They're gonna say everything else is crap or shit, like, let's start over, let's start fresh. And so with that, that's the projected attitude that we have from the third line. So this is like for all profile numbers, if you are like, if you have a 1 or a 2 or a 3 or a 4, 5, 6, but also like look at this gate if you have any of these lines. 4 is the abdicator, in which case they have responsibility thrust upon them, but they don't want it. So they abdicate that responsibility the way a monarch would abdicate the throne. And similar to the 2, they kind of push it away from themselves and say, no, thank you, not me, please. 5 is the general, which has the projection that they can fix everything if everything goes wrong. And so the general comes in to like march the army towards a battle and guide everyone and tell them what to do and where to go, and hopefully lead the battle to victory. There's a lot of pressure on the general. And I believe 6, so here in Richard Rudd in his chapter, he talked about it being like visionary, which I thought was the 6th, but he said it's the 7th chakra. And for 4, he said facilitator, which is different than abdicator. But 6, I'm going to look it up because I can't remember it off the top of my head. It is the administrator. Is it? Yeah, it's the administrator, which sounds similar to facilitator. Like they delegate, they tell everyone else what to do. and they're kind of in that position of being, like I said earlier, the face of the company that's there, but they're the leader that's actually delegating and giving power to other people in that process. And so for all the hexagrams, all the gene keys, the sixth becomes that magical bridge between that gene key and the next one, and is also like the perfect completion of that gene key. Whereas like the first line of every hexagram gene key gate is like the root of it, the heart of it, what it's all about. The sixth line is like, okay, when it reaches that point of completion, or in essence, like it fulfills itself, it becomes the sixth line. So all our projected attitudes as leaders should be the quote unquote administrator. It comes to that point of being an administrator where we can guide others and tell them what it is that they need to do or what they need to know, et cetera, et cetera. So that's that. But like there's all that for all the roll gates. Like I said, 7, 13, 110, 59, 27, which right now, like we have a lot of them defined because we have 7, 1, and 13 defined by the current transits. So like everyone being born right now is being born with heavy role energies, heavy, not responsibilities, but think like Hamlet comes with a role, Macbeth comes with the role. And so these children that are being born are coming with the sense of, I don't know if it's a sense of purpose, but it's a sense of entity of being. So I think it's interesting to note. Not necessarily relevant or important, but interesting. Everything's interesting.
No, I mean, yeah, interesting is our favorite word as an 1156 channel holder, I think. But there was like 15 different threads that I want to pull on. I'm not going to because we're starting to get close to wanting to wrap up here. But one of the things I thought was interesting, just to kind of just backpedal a little bit, was the idea that the heart center is the facilitator energy. And because the 7 is coming from the G center, it feels very much like you're in the midst of it with the facilitation energy or whatever, the abdicator energy, and you are pulling it from the center forward. Whereas I feel like the visionary energy is like it's at the top, which is the chakra, and it's kind of leading from the front. And so not that one's better than the other, but I do like that's the way that I see the facilitator energy kind of showing up. The other thing I just wanted to touch on was when you talked about what Richard Rudd said about children, because he said that, like you said, it's holographic, but really what it comes down to is like monkey see, monkey do. Whereas energetically, monkeys see the energy that you're perpetuating or you're putting out into the world, and then the child immediately understands it, and then you don't have to explain anything. You just have to be in that virtue, and the child immediately gets, okay, this is what I'm going to be. There's no like back and forth. We're not having a conversation. It's just like, there's no like, mom, I don't want to go to bed at 10, like whatever. It's like you embody that virtue and your kid immediately picks it up. There's no middleman, there's no questions, there's no problems. And so that
I want to respond to that super quickly, because that phrase monkey see, monkey do. Have you heard of the 100th monkey?
Yeah, I have.
So even it gets to a point where you don't even have to see one monkey doing anything, because it affects all the monkeys living on the planet when enough monkeys behave in a certain way. So it just goes to prove Richard Rudd's point.
Well, and that's too to talk about the idea of, because I think that virtue is also a high level of consciousness, and energetically it's vibrating at the higher octaves of consciousness, which is like joy, love, appreciation, all of those things. And what the David Hawkins, who wrote Power versus Force, said is just that like the energy of one person who's vibrating at that level is going to, or it can offset the energy of millions. So it's like having that like on top of, like you're immediately imprinting it onto your child, but then like that vibration too, it like it you can't be, and this is what happened with Jesus, or Jesus, Christ, the Christ consciousness is like, his energy is such that he gets in front of someone who's got an illness or a disease or whatever, and immediately the energy of the disease cannot be in presence with Christ. It's not because Jesus is like, like throwing some spell on it. It's like his energy is literally so powerful as a force for healing that sickness cannot be near him. So I think that, that's kind of the idea of the holographic. It's that, and we're getting there, and I can feel it. My emo center, my ESP can feel it, where like I sense people's energy. I don't care what you have to say anymore, even though I don't even care what I have to say anymore on some level, because I'm like, okay, like what subconscious programming is this thing that I'm about to say coming from, right? Is it coming from source, or is it coming from a subconscious, unconscious belief system that I haven't fully been able to uproot? And so it's like, when you're able to speak from source, you can see it, and you can tell when somebody's doing it, and you can feel that energy. And when somebody's coming from an unconscious belief system, even if they say the most intelligible thing that you could possibly imagine, you can still sense the energy is off. And so this is where, the virtue is, I think the virtue is like, it's already bleeding into everything, because it's about energy, and like you can't hide your energy anymore. Whereas people, when we were all kind of living underneath the fray, when we were all in the weeds, it was hard to tell what was going on. But now I think a lot of people are aware enough that even if they still have some programmings that they're running that aren't good, that aren't in their highest alignment, let's just say that, they're still able to sense the programmings that other people are coming from. So like you said, with the 100th monkey, eventually it's going to be like, everybody's just going to be seeing from that place. And the people who have like ill intent, where they have unconscious power control issues, and that's where they're coming from, they're just like no longer relevant. We can't even be in the presence with them. They're not even able, because they can't hide. It's like they're naked now. So there was that thing that I wanted to say about children and the imprint and the holographic nature of it. And then the other thing is just that true leaders don't want you stuck on them, right? Like I think that's such an important like facet of this. Like a leader wants you to empower yourself, and so you're not like sucked up to them for the rest of your life. And if anybody like the false leaders, right, the false leaders in the media, the false leaders at the head of state, the false monarchs, the false leaders even when it comes to our healthcare system and things like that, like they all are benefiting from a state of disempowerment. And so that somebody's not correct, they're not a virtuous leader if they're looking to disempower their populace or the people that are following them. And so it's actually a lot easier to tell who's who than anyone thinks. And I think who's who, again, like it's like basically this like mass, everyone's getting naked energetically. And like we're all going to be able to see, the veil is going to be dropped, like who's what, as long as you're starting to be able to perceive things differently. So I think that's probably all I need to say about everything that you said. Do you have anything that you want to say in relationship to what I said?
I do, but I'll try to keep it short. Kind of just like, I feel like what you said, and I will not try to re-say what you said, but what you said can be said of all the gene key gifts, cities, that energy doesn't lie. Like when someone's operating from that place, you see it, it's naked in front of you, versus shadow. And that's not to say that shadows are bad, because the journey of transformation is through the shadow. You have to embrace it, you can't get rid of it. But there's a difference between working through it and using it for your own benefit, like with this gene key. But yeah, I feel like part of what you said can be said for all of them, but I don't remember specifically the words that you said to be able to say it.
Absolutely can be said for all of them. And it's basically just that all of them, like you're able to, if you're able to perceive, you're able to ascertain which place somebody's coming from. And it's not difficult at all if you're aware and you're tapped in enough. So and I think everyone's getting to that place. Like it's not just like I'm like, oh, it's just me and my emotional center. Like everybody's getting to that place, but everybody's getting there at a different speed. And honestly, it can be a little disorienting to be there because you feel naked, but like you don't recognize that still some people can't see you. So like you feel more naked than they are technically because they still think that you don't have a they still think that you have a faulty vision because they haven't had the veils lifted yet. And so it's like you feel naked because you're like, everyone can see me, but it's like nobody can see you yet. And like you can see everybody else naked. So it's literally like that saying, like when you're afraid that when you have a dream or you're afraid of public speaking, just picture everyone naked. It's like energetically like
That's happening.
yeah, that's happening. So fear not if you feel like very vulnerable. I know I do. I know that all of my energetic flaws, quote unquote flaws, and I say that in a kind of loose way because obviously contrast is part of the human experience, but all of my energetic misalignments that create behavior in me that is more interested in power than in love, like I'm becoming more hyper aware of them too. That doesn't mean I can just pull them out immediately, but the awareness is the first step. And so I'm feeling very self-conscious about them. Honestly, I'm like, wow, Sarah, like, why are you feeling like that? Why do you want this person to behave that way? Whatever it is. So if you're feeling like that too, it's just like we're humans, things, and when I say you, I mean our potential whomever is listening to this. We're just humans and everything evolves at its own speed and we can't make it happen faster than it is. So congratulations for as far as you've gotten. You're doing a really amazing job, and be as easy on yourself as you can.
Good words to live by.
Yeah, good words to live by and good words to end on, unless you have anything else to say.
No, just want to say thank you for listening. Catch us next week.
Thank you for
listening. Get your free profiles at geneticmatrix.com or genekeys.com/free-profile. We'll try to remember to give you links.
Look at that memory. And yeah, we'll be talking about gate 4 next week and kind of all of the energetic turnout of some of the stuff we're talking about this week. So
we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. Have a great full moon, everybody.
Bye.